Welcome to the Chew Brewer Stew podcast. Every other Sunday, we'll release an episode of the podcast featuring an interview with a business owner in the food industry, from restaurants to breweries to bakeries, and everything in between. We ask them about their journey and the process of becoming a successful business owner in hopes of helping others to do the same. I'm Mike Curtin, and the podcast starts now. Welcome to the Chew Brewer Stew podcast. I'm your host, Mike Curtin, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so you never miss another episode of the podcast. Considering this is my first episode, and thank you for listening, I'd just like to do a little background on why I started this podcast. Way back in 2015, I started home brewing, and way before that, I fell in love with craft brewing. Before that, my first job was in a restaurant. And also, I used to DJ inside bars and restaurants. So at some point, I thought to myself, I'd love to have my own bar or restaurant. I was never a great student. I always been way better learner by doing things hands-on. So I figured, why not start a podcast where I sit down with business owners in the food industry, get inside their heads, and learn the business from them. Learn their mistakes, learn what makes them successful, in hopes of not only helping myself, but others who are trying to do the same. A couple of months back, I had the honor of sitting down with Ferguson from Interboro Spirits and Ales in Brooklyn, New York. He gave me a breakdown of how he went from the music industry, which was slowing down, and how he got into home brewing. And finally, he decided to start his own brewery. So here's the podcast. If I sound a little nervous, I'm sure I was, being that it was my first interview. I hope you enjoy it. We're here at Interboro Spirit and Ales with Jesse Ferguson.
Cheers.
Cheers, brother. Thanks for being with us.
Happy to host you.
Yes. So tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into the business of brewing.
So I got into brewing initially as a home brewer through I had family. I had my sister and my brother-in-law both ended up in California after meeting here in Brooklyn, working in Sonoma Valley in wineries. And after a couple years in wine, my brother-in-law sort of lost his patience with the wine scene,
right,
and really got into beer, and then ended up studying beer at UC Davis, which is a well-renowned, high-regarded brewing school. And sort of at that time, I was in my early 20s and was just sort of, I would go visit them, and we would do blind tastings on wine, and then we'd do blind tastings on beer, and they were in Northern California, so there was just great beer everywhere.
Yes.
And he started home brewing, and I was sort of there, sort of hanging out, and then they ended up moving to Colorado, and then moving to. I grew up in Colorado, so
okay.
I grew up
over
drinking
there as well.
Yeah, I grew up drinking my story is when we would send my buddy's older brother into the liquor store when we were 13 to get us OE or Mickey's. He'd come back out with bombers of Fat Tire and be like, "Drink this, it's better," you know. So I grew up with craft beer. My dad's favorite beer was Odell 90 Shilling. So my brother-in-law and my sister end up in Georgia working out of a brewery called Terrapin.
Okay.
And by then, at some point, another good friend of mine and I had met the guys from Six Point and discovered that we could buy kegs from them, and we learned what a jockey box was, which we went to this hardware store on Long Island called Carp's, because back then New York didn't have any homebrew stores. This is 2006, I guess, or 2005. This is before my son was born, so my son was born in 2009. I was married, so I was 2005, so it's somewhere right in the middle there. Right. And we went to Carp's to buy the equipment to build our own jockey box, so we could buy kegs off Six Point and drink beer at home, draft beer at home.
Awesome.
Because there was no Six Point in package at that point.
Right.
It was way before Six Point was available in cans. And we were at Carp's, and the dude is we're looking at it. He's got this whole ingredients, and we're like, "Wait, you can make beer at home?" And he's like, "Yeah, you can make your own beer." And blah, blah. So I went back a week later because it was my buddy Chris's birthday, and bought him a homebrew kit, and that was in June of whatever year it was. And by the end of that summer, we brewed 6 batches of beer, and we just totally got the bug. And so I homebrewed for a bunch, and yeah, that's how I got it. I mean, like I said, started out drinking craft beer, and then by like at that point, sometime after between 2005 and 2007 or 8 or whatever, was homebrewing my ass off.
That's pretty awesome, man. That's great. I mean, I know because I did a little homebrewing, and it's definitely a bug for sure.
Yeah.
Once you start doing it, it's like it just catches
yeah.
fire.
It was like
you want to do it every single day.
It was like barbecuing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it was
right,
like
exactly.
it was like, you know, it was like, oh, I got this dry rub, and you can only do it. You know, you need a whole day to do it. Like my buddy's dad, we used to do it inside on like stovetops, right? And then my buddy grew up out in Midwood and his dad had a backyard. So like that summer, like we had planned like 3 brew days where we were gonna like set up in his backyard and like actually we like got a keg from the guys at 6 Point, cut the top off of it with a grinder, like made a kettle out of it, and I mean, yeah, you know, you just like set up and start brewing beer and you're drinking beer and you got a barbecue going and you know it's just fun. So
what was like the morale of your friends and family when you were about to start this?
Well, so this business, because I started another brewery before this business called Carton Brewing in New Jersey, and that was the one that really got me into brewing professionally. So like I was home brewing, like I said. I used to work in the music industry, so I was working at a record label, and it was like 2007, 2008, and you know record sales were just tanking. Like you couldn't sell a CD as a coaster. So we were, and I eventually my son was born in 2009, and by like 2000, I guess it was still 2009 because my son was like 9 months old or 6 months old, and the record company I worked for went out of business. So I said to my brother-in-law and my sister, I'm like, I want to be a brewer, and they were like, get in line. Everybody wants to be a brewer.
Right.
And
to do now.
Yeah, and so. And because by then I was homebrewing like crazy, and a buddy of mine, really good friend of mine, Amit, got me a job at another record label. And I spent a year working at a second record label. I worked at the other one for like 10 years. I helped start it and was like really dedicated and super passionate about it. Going to work for somebody else's record label was kind of like, I just didn't have the passion for it. And then meanwhile, my buddy Augie Carton, and his cousin Chris were like, we're gonna open a brewery, and we want you in New Jersey, and we want you to be the brewer. And I was like, yeah, right. I gotta feed my wife and kids. I mean, my wife can feed us too, but and they were serious. And over like that year, I was homebrewing like crazy and formulated a bunch of recipes. And they found a place in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey, where we could build the brewery, and they funded it themselves and bought all the equipment. And by 2010, I was helping sort of oversee the build out and by 2011 we were selling beer, and I did that for like 4 years until 2015, and I just couldn't drive to Jersey. I lived in Brooklyn the whole time, and I couldn't drive to Jersey, and so at that point in my life, my family was super supportive. I was I was unemployed, but I had been unemployed for a minute, and my whole family was very supportive. I think, and in those first 2, 3, 4 years of opening a small business, I was working nonstop, like leaving for the brewery. I drove every day, and I would leave for the brewery at 4:30 or 5 in the morning, so I could try and beat traffic getting out over the Verrazano or through one of the tunnels. And then if I was lucky, I could leave the brewery at 4 and get home to pick my kid up from preschool by 5:30. But then usually 1, 2, or 3 nights a week, we'd have some sort of event where we'd go in to promote the brewery, or we'd stay, or things would like go wrong, and I'd be there for, there were nights where like I had at Carton, there was a couch upstairs. I had a sleeping bag and a pillow in 2 different drawers, and like I would sleep there, I would say multiple times a month, where I would call my wife and be like, I'm just going to crash here because I got to be back in 5 hours anyway. So like, what's the point of me driving back?
So was that like one of you say like your toughest situations you'd have to deal with as far as
spending the night there?
No, I'm saying as far as the opening a business, like opening your brewery.
Yeah, just the amount of time that goes into it, right? It's just so. Especially beer. You can't. Once you've started the day, you can't just fucking stop. You know what I mean? Like you can't. There are certain components. There's certain parts of this job where you can be like, all right, well, I'm just doing the taxes. Well, I've been here for 12 hours. I'm just gonna stop, and I'll come back and pick up where I left it off in the morning. But when you're making the beer, it's like if something went wrong, or you didn't plan your day right, or the day you just had too much work to get done in one day, you can't. There's not a lot of places where you can just stop and then pick up in the morning. You know, the product has to be taken through through the full process. So, yeah, the time commitment is a lot, and I mean, and you know, emotionally, it's you know, it's a lot because you're so committed to the success that you know when things go wrong, you know,
got the blinders on.
Yeah, it's tough. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it's really hard.
So, like, how did you go about finding capital to fund everything?
For Interboro. So then the story of Interboro is that I was at Carton and just kind of like I said, got tired of driving to Jersey every day, quit going to Jersey every day, went and started working at Other Half for a year while and at this point I had met my current business partner is Laura, who you emailed with. So she and I met. She wanted to open a distillery, and I wanted to. I mean, I was thinking about opening my own brewery, and so we spent a good amount of time sort of talking and figuring out what we could do. She had a decent amount of capital that she could to get Interboro off the ground, and then we went and found investors, and you know, based on based on our plan and what our track record, people were willing to give us a little bit of cash. But you know, it's not easy. The way we really, I mean, the funny story is like we had a bunch of people who were interested, right? But without but they were nobody really was like looking to like pull the trigger, and we found the space. And we found the space through. I was working at Other Half at the time, and one of the owners of Other Half, Andrew, was still delivering beer at the time on the truck, and he called me up when I was at the brewery and said, "Hey, are you still looking for a space?" And I was yes. And he says, "Well, I just drove by my old boss's warehouse, and it's got a for rent sign on it now." And we met with him like the next day, the landlord, and had a lease by like the end of that day. And we committed to signing the lease before we actually had the cash to open the brewery completely. But by signing the lease and proving that we had the space, we got a bunch of investors to come to the table right away. Like as soon as we made that commitment, and that was it was hard. It was a tough commitment to make to sign a lease because we were kind of all in at that point, you know. But it definitely worked out. We had people all these people who were sort of hesitant, sort of at that point said, "Oh yeah, all right, yeah, you guys are for real. Let's do this. Let's start writing checks." So.
Well, was there like a defining moment that you kind of knew like everything was just working right in your favor? That it was kind of moving?
I don't think you ever are able to get your head out of the weeds enough to think everything's working right. That's one of the drawbacks. You know what I mean? Is that it's all so there's always so much going on. Right. It's hard to ever feel like it's all working right. But you know, there's a lot of moments where you feel really good about where things are at, and I think that was a moment, you know what I mean? Like that moment was a really positive moment for us to feel like, yeah, this is going to work out. Obviously, getting open and selling going out and doing the first deliveries, that was a great feeling and really felt right. And then, you know, then we opened the taste. So we delivered our first beers in August of 2016, and we opened the tasting room like right after Labor Day. 2016, and like the reception that we had the first day we were open, like just the excitement amongst the beer community and people we didn't know, you know what I mean? That was that felt really good.
I feel like it's been booming, the beer industry. It's just, I think it's a thing now. Guys just plan, or groups just plan to like, hey, let's go to the brewery for the day. And it's become a thing. It's pretty insane. Something you never thought you'd have to deal with?
HR.
HR?
Yeah, you know. like really dealing with employees
Right.
and like what employees, the demands that people and the expectations and the just tough. It's people's lives. You know what I mean? Like
Your people's
people's
livelihoods.
livelihoods.
It's
You know what I
crazy.
mean? So like,
Of course.
that was the thing that like even up to the point at where I was like running carton essentially. I still wasn't making the employment decisions, and that really does fall to the owners. And so it's like that's real. You know what I mean? Like dealing with people's ups and downs and trying to be there for people in the best way you can. It's not a challenge that I really was like, look, when I thought about opening a brewery, you know what I mean? Like I was laser focused on making really good beer, you know what I mean? Or making really good whiskey. And, it takes other people to do that. And you got to trust people, and you got to hope people trust you, and, and it's only, you're only one side of the equation ever. So.
All about having a good team.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Is there, when it comes to marketing, what is really your strategy? Do you have a whole team set up for that as well?
No, I mean, we don't really have the money to have like a big marketing budget. Our marketing is this room.
Right.
You know what I mean? Our marketing is the cans that we put out on a weekly basis.
Okay.
Our marketing is the sort of quality and integrity of the product that we put out, and then hoping that gets conveyed to people. I mean, it's 2019. Social media
Of course.
is as loud as any other sort of platform you could look for. So it's just about trying to maximize that. We really count on having a message that can come across as like honest and sincere, and then quality product and for the best of our ability to make people's experience when they come here, a sort of just a really quality experience, so that people believe they're like, I had a great time. I went to Interboro. All the beer was great. I got awesome service. It was an awesome atmosphere. And
you think atmosphere and ambiance is a big part of it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the quality of the product and the service that people get, I think, are the two most important aspects. I think the ambiance is like, this room doesn't have much ambiance. I mean, it obviously has a ton of ambiance, but like it is. I think that is what it is.
Right.
It just has to be something, and you have to identify what it is and try and sort of play to the strong suit of it. My business partner Laura is really the driving force behind this whole tasting room, and we have a kitchen and like the food program and all that. I'm like sort of the product, and then and obviously as an owner, like super concerned that every time a person walks through the door, they feel comfortable, But there's times like on Saturday afternoons where it's really busy, and I just tell people not to come. I'm just like, whatever they're like, oh, when can I visit? I'm like, don't come a Saturday at 4. You know what I mean? Like,
I think I was here at Saturday.
Yeah, and it's like jammed out, and you can't get a seat, and like.
I mean, that's a great
No,
feeling.
it's a great feeling, but it's tough too, because you want everybody who walks in to feel like they're totally welcome, and when it's super crowded, like people don't feel welcome. You know what I mean? They feel like obviously it feels good to be someplace that's crowded. So those are my concerns. Is like, what's the customer experience when they come in, and how well can they get the beer and enjoy it. But yeah, I mean, I think. It's restaurant business. You know what I mean? So like, you gotta understand that people are gonna judge you on like every bit of it. You know what I mean? So ambiance is obviously important, but I think we tend to take our brand and our sort of is based more around a little more like, it's not so. Obviously it's ultra premium products, but it's not meant to be a exclusive experience, right? It's meant to be a sort of an encompassing experience where everybody feels welcome when they come in, and it's not. We're not, we never wanted to be snobby or highbrow or any, or make people feel like that. We price all our beers at the same price point. We price, there's not a. It's not a. It's obviously more expensive than your average bar, but it's certainly not. We're not pricing out anybody or anything like that. So it's just meant to be a very welcoming and sort of down-to-earth approach to craft beer and spirits.
So you mentioned people judging when they come in, just on the whole experience. How big has Yelp factored into that?
I mean, it's not just Yelp, right? It's Facebook, it's Yelp, it's Google, it's anywhere anybody can put anything. I'm not personally super good at it. My business partner Laura tends to engage people a little bit more when they've had negative experiences. But yeah, you gotta be aware that, like, you know, there's this sort of outside, you know, realm that's outside your control for where people are talking about it and reviewing it. But you know, the same could be said for beer reviews, right? You know, like Untapped exists, and everybody, not all beer drinkers, but most beer drinkers look at it, and you can't control what people are going to say. You know what I mean? All you can do is control your side of it, and then the difference, I suppose, is that, well, it's the same with beer, right? If somebody has a really negative experience, and it's rooted in a misunderstanding, or it's rooted in you know. We get reviews of the place where the people like, that was the rudest bartender, and then we talk to the bartender, and they're like, well, those people brought bottles of somebody else's brewery's beer in here and sat in our brewery and opened them, and even that's not the end of the world, right? Because we let people do that to some degree, like that. I'm not trying to publicize that, but like, you know, if it's a slow night and some regulars come in and somebody brings a bottle of something they want to share. But they always going to touch base with the bartender first, right? They're not going to sit over here in the corner and like crack a whole bunch of beers from a different brewery. And then when the bartender says, "Hey, you didn't order any beer," or like, you know, then be like, "Oh, well, he's so rude." I mean, you know, we've had a bunch of instances where, not a bunch, we've had a small number of instances where people had negative experiences, and sometimes you can address it and sometimes you can't. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think that being able to, I mean, what Laura is, you know, she places a whole bunch of value in just responding, at least, so that even if those people,
like a community.
Yeah, so that even if those people don't recognize the care that she's putting into responding, at least other people in the community are going to see, well, the owner responded and addressed the issue. You know what I mean? We had one time where somebody slipped and fell. You know what I mean? So it was at the beginning of winter, and we didn't realize, you know, that how wet it was, and so we got doormats and we put, you know, grip tape on the step and stuff like that. So it's like certain things you can address, you know, certain things you just can't address. You know.
So you talk about people bringing other people's beer, and as far as competition goes, is it more like, I feel like it seems there's a lot of brotherhood when it comes to breweries. It's not even like a competition thing. It's almost like, hey, let's collab on something.
Well, I mean, you know, we have the best beer in New York City, but not no, it's very much the New York City beer scene is a great community. You know, and there's a number of different reasons why that is, both on the sort of brewery production side and also just on the business side, is that it makes more sense to be friends with the other guys than it does to be enemies. But a lot of the brewers, there's like a lineage you can follow amongst 2 or 3 different breweries. It's starting to be a little bit more now that the years go by, but like a lot of people can trace their internships or their apprenticeships or whatever you want to call it back to, you know, either Brooklyn Brewery or Greenpoint Beer Works or Six Point or Other Half. And so a lot of the people who opened breweries in the last 3 or 4 years all worked together at different breweries at one point or another. So that part of it sort of, you know, helps build the community. You know, like we opened up, and then Grimm opened up 2 blocks away from here, like less than a year ago. We embraced them as neighbors. You know what I mean? Because they're great, they make great beer. They're right there. People who they've been around as a brewery 5 years longer than us. So people come to town and we'll go there, and then, Interboro's right there. I've never been there. I've been meaning to go there. They come right here, or, you know, vice versa. So it's great in the sense of, you know, rising tides raises all ships. KCBC's around the corner. They're in the same boat we are, as having opened and started their brand, and we love them. It's also great to have neighbors who operate within the same business as us, because if you're short some yeast or some grain or some hops, you can always call somebody and say, "Hey, I need this," and they do the same. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, in terms of competition, I mean, there's always some friendly competition. You know what I mean? Like there's always, but I would like to think that, I mean, we certainly don't badmouth people, and like I'd like to think that other people have a respect for us and what we do, and you know, it's mutual. You know, I think it works out, and it's also like reflects well on our whole scene as a whole, that like we work together and we do collaborations, and because then people come, other brewers or guests, and they really feel like they're part of something. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they visit in New York, and that the New York brewers are sort of a thing, and that we get along with each other and stuff. So that part's really fun.
Nice. So like as far as mental breaks go, is it important to kind of like step away every once in a while, or is it kind of like it's a constant?
I don't know. I mean,
Constant
I've got 2 kids and a wife, and like I do my best to take a weekend where I'm actually not gonna be here or not think about work. I mean, there's definitely times where it's all encompassing. But yeah, I think that anybody needs to be able to take a step back from their passion and just do something else. You know what I mean?
Right.
So.
And what would be the best piece of advice you'd give to somebody about to start up or try to open their own place, or if they have any thoughts of opening their own place?
I don't know, so much. But I mean, I guess I would say that, you know, just making sure that you're really serious about wanting to commit that much of your life to something, and then if you're planning on making beer, then make sure that you're making the best beer you possibly can. Because I mean, that is sort of another element to the whole New York City brewers thing, is that like, you know, you have a high level of confidence that everybody's making quality product, and for a lot of consumers, if they have one bad craft beer, then they're gonna, especially if it's their first, then they be, I don't want that stuff. You know, I don't want that craft beer. You know what I mean? I don't like it. So like, making sure that all the beer that any brewer is making in New York City is like high quality. That's, I think, really important.
Do you ever have to take a loss with certain brews if they ever came out?
Yeah,
bad?
We're constantly analyzing and checking our beer for quality. And if there's something that comes out that's not good, we dump it. You know, and you know, it's way cheaper to dump it before you put it out into the market than it is to try and deal with the fact that you put a bad product into the market.
Right.
You can never come back. It's hard to come back from that.
Right.
So yeah, we do that a lot. Not too much, I hope, but we do it if we have to.
And is there a story you can tell us? Or
a funny story. I'm trying to think. There's so many funny stories.
If not, no worries, man.
I don't know. The best I can think of is that like we got our system. I mean, it's just not even funny. It's just tragic. But
all right, tragic.
we got our system. We were on like the 2nd brew or the 3rd brew, and the mash kept stinking. We couldn't figure out why the mash. I couldn't figure out, because it was all on me. Couldn't figure out why the mash kept stinking. Like the 2nd time we were gonna brew, we had like a whole bunch of the investors coming to have a party that night, and like the mash wasn't draining. And a trick I'd seen people do to like relieve the vacuum, because like the fear is that you've got a stuck mash that maybe you got a vacuum on because it's stuck, and then if you just relieve the vacuum by like getting the plow in there and scraping like one hole in the mash grates. So Nick, who's our assistant brewer, was and now he like runs our cannon line. I was like, help me! I'm gonna like open the manway just a little bit, just enough to get the rake in and scrape a little bit. And he's like, you sure? And I was like, yeah, we're gonna do this. So we try to open the manway, and just mash just comes pouring out. Like, and we're like trying to like get it closed, and it's like 160 degrees, and it's like burning our arms and shit. And finally we get it closed, and then we turn around, and it's like this deep, like all over the fucking brewery, and we're like, we got these dudes like an hour till like our investor crew is coming. And so we're like shoveling it up and sweeping it, and Laura's like, what the fuck happened? And I'm like, well, I'll explain later, you know, like, and we get it all cleaned up, and they show up, and we're still like mopping and sweeping and shit. So I mean, I don't know, that was just sucked, but it was funny. And then it turns out like 6 or 7 mashes later, it keeps sticking, and finally one day I realized that like I had the rakes go in the wrong direction. I had like everybody here, every brewer I fucking knew. I was like, I can't figure it out. I keep sticking the mash. Finally, one day I just turned the rakes the other direction, and presto, never happened again. You know, and it was a brand new system. I just didn't realize it. So that's my story.
All right.
All right.
Well, that's thank you for sitting with us.
Yeah,
man.
cool.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Jesse Ferguson at Interboro Spirits and Nails in Brooklyn. Mike Curtin for True Brewer Stew.
Cheers.
Hey guys, so that was the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found it as informative as I did. There's many more to come after this, so please stay tuned. On the next episode, I'll be sitting down with Kyle Hurst from Big Al's Brewing Company in Long Island City, New York. Every other Sunday, I'll be posting them up, so stay tuned. And like I said, subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Once again, I'm Mike Curtin for True Brewer Stew. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.